I had a very close relationship with my parents, almost too close, that I saw them all the time. I was kind of like, it sounds weird, but I kind of filled the place of being the wife to my dad, or the husband to my mother, in that I would fill their emotional needs when they weren't filling it for each other. So, and I was always so concerned about them being happy, and I wasn't really so concerned about myself. It was really triangulated, but I was really close with them. And I was daddy's little girl. With my mom, she was my, kooky, wild best friend. I had moved away from New York. I remember it was January 1st, 1995, to be with my fiance. I fell in love with someone who lived in California. And during the 10 months that followed, I saw my parents on 6 different occasions. That's how close I was with them. And their last trip out, things seemed a little different. They seemed to be getting along better. And that was about, as I recall, about 10 days before my mother was murdered by my father. And then it's the Wednesday before my mom died. She called me at like 6 in the morning. She would always forget that I was on, West Coast time. I was on my way to work, and her and my dad had come to this agreement that they were gonna get separated but stay living together, or something like that. And she sounded like it was okay. And then she went into the fact that he was cheating on her. A few days later, I was at a workshop. I had decided I'm quitting my day job. I'm going after what I want to do, which was acting at the time. And I went to this weekend-long workshop that was about, getting your dream into action. And I remember coming home from a Saturday, I believe, and my fiance greeting me, and it being really quiet in the house, and his son was in the other room, really quiet, which was unusual. And he told me that my mother was gone. What happened was, my father killed my mother, but then had a lawyer in place, and there was a cleanup. There were like 8 hours before my mother's body was discovered, and outside of the house, my father's lawyer called the police and said, there's a dead body in this house. And then within days, he connected with my mother's older sister, my Aunt Jeanette, and she ended up being there for him in a very odd way that we didn't understand. None of us understood. She certainly was there for my father the moment this happened, and kind of pushing me out of his life because I was demanding to know what happened. And he ended up moving in with her very quickly. And, they ended up getting married. He only went to prison for, I believe it was 2 years. He was sentenced to 1.5 to 5 years for involuntary manslaughter. That was the plea bargain it went down to, mainly because his gun, was never found. My mom died in 1995, and I was in deep despair for many years, 3 years for sure. I just couldn't talk about anything, and I was feeling a lot of shame. And what turned things around for me really was I started to write my story. And I was an actor already in Los Angeles, and I was in an acting class, and I had an opportunity to do something called a personal story exercise, which was about being really real on stage. And I feel like up until that point I was hiding behind characters, and I was scared to death. I thought I was going to be so judged by everyone. It was a class of 100 people, but I inwardly knew that I had to write my story and share it. Like, instead of the judgment that I thought I would get, I really thought I would get. I got so much empathy and compassion, and after I put the scene up, people came over to me and started sharing with me about things in their lives they had been ashamed of, And I mean, it might have even been like a divorce from their parents got divorced or something like that. It wasn't necessarily the same thing. So I had already gone to school for my master's in spiritual psychology. I was right in the middle of it. And so I had applied tons of healing techniques and forgiveness techniques with my father so that I could even talk to him when I did. For the school, what I was studying was to learn, for me, now that this has happened, how do I not be a victim? How can I turn this around instead of keeping on asking why me, why can't it be different? It's like, okay, this has happened. How can I let go of this anger so I stop re-wounding myself with each thought? Because one day, all of a sudden I got that, because I was hating him, loving him, hating him, loving him, and I got that if I hate him because he made me, I'm hating a part of myself. And I no longer wanted to do that to myself. And so I realized, like, I just had this insight of the oneness of us. And in that moment, I took one of his hats and I went to the top of a mountain, and I said a prayer of release and oneness, and I threw the hat over the mountainside, and something released in me. It was like this burden of having to punish him, this burden of hating any part of me that was like him just left. And so then I went through a lot of self-regret and self-loathing, and then I was able to practice self-forgiveness of myself and truly knowing that I was doing the best I could. And I remember raising my hand somewhere like in April of, the year-long, the second year of the course, and saying, you know what, I actually realize I don't want to speak with my father. I want to forgive, but I don't want him in my life. And it was like a huge aha that, oh, reconciliation was more like in my heart having good feelings for him, or remembering the good times, but not ever seeing him again. So yeah, I had a huge shift that it didn't mean I had to see him again, but it was about clearing my energy so that my day wasn't wrecked if I thought about him. You have to actually fully feel your anger in a healthy way, whether it's free-form writing, going through an anger workshop, but you have to fully feel it before you can move before you can move into forgiveness. And that's what happened to me. I couldn't really fully move into forgiveness with my dad until I fully felt my anger, which I did through my master's program, and then I went to like one of these primal scream workshops, and I was like, I couldn't even get there until I saw other people, and I'm like, oh, I really do have anger. So and then of course moving out of that, not indulging in it, and getting into, okay, well, now how do I not be righteous? Now that I can say I'm so mad and this is why, how do I move out of the righteousness? Because then that gets you caught up in a whole other dance of not being healed. I really think it's giving up the resentments that you hold inside of you. Yeah. Against someone for something they've done.